They told her parents to prepare for the worst. Their little girl, just 6 years old, had only days left to live. The hospital room was quiet. Machines beeped softly. Her tiny body lay still, barely holding on. Doctors had done everything. Medications, surgeries, prayers, nothing worked. They said there was nothing more to do. Just wait. But then, something happened. Something no one, not the nurses, not the doctors, not even her parents, could explain. It didn't come from a new medicine. Or some last-minute miracle treatment. It came from her dog. A German shepherd. Loyal. Watchful. And somehow, he knew. What he did next would leave even the coldest hospital staff in tears. And it changed everything. Her name was Emily. 6 years old. Bright, curious, full of life. The kind of child who lit up every room without even trying. She loved the color yellow, thought ice cream was a food group, and believed her German shepherd, Max, could understand every word she said. It started with a fever. Then fatigue. Then bruises, strange ones, showing up without reason. At first, her parents thought it was just a virus. Kids get sick all the time, right? But the signs didn't go away. They got worse. Fast. Doctors ran tests. Blood work. Scans. More tests. And then, the room changed. No more reassuring smiles. No more, she'll be fine. Just silence. And then, those words. We're so sorry. It's leukemia. And it's aggressive. In an instant, their world collapsed. Chemotherapy started almost immediately. Emily, once bouncing around the house with Max at her heels, was now pale, weak, and confined to a hospital bed. She lost her hair. Her appetite. Her energy. But not her spirit. Not completely. Not as long as Max was there. He would curl up by her feet, nudge her hand with his nose when she cried, and somehow, even in her worst moments, make her smile. But the treatments weren't working. Every option, exhausted. Doctors met with her parents, sat them down. Gently. Quietly. There's nothing more we can do. It's time to say goodbye. They were given days. Maybe a week, at most. A countdown had started. And all they could do was wait. Max wasn't just a pet. He was family. He had come into Emily's life when she was just a toddler, a clumsy, giggling little girl learning how to walk, and Max was right there beside her. From the very beginning, they were inseparable. Wherever Emily went, Max followed. Nap time. He was curled beside her. Playtime. He was chasing bubbles in the backyard. Bedtime. His head would rest right on her feet at the end of the bed, guarding her like a silent, furry guardian angel. Even when Emily got sick, Max never left her side. Hospital rules didn't allow pets, but the nurses, after seeing how Emily would light up when she saw him, made an exception. They said he could visit, as long as he was calm. And calm he was. Always. Max would walk slowly through the hospital halls, tail low, eyes focused. He seemed to understand that this was serious. That his best friend needed him more than ever. In the hospital room, he became her shadow. He'd rest his head on the edge of her bed, eyes fixed on her face, never moving unless she did. When she was in pain, he would whimper softly, almost as if trying to absorb it for her. As her condition worsened, Max's behavior started to change. He grew restless. Anxious. He wouldn't eat unless she ate. Wouldn't sleep unless she slept. And any time someone tried to move her, even gently, he would stand, alert, body tense. It was as if he knew something was happening. Something big. Something bad. And then, the night everything changed. Max did something no one had ever seen him do before. It was late. The kind of quiet that only exists in hospital hallways at 2 a.m. Emily's parents sat by her bedside, drained, hollowed out by exhaustion and grief. Monitors beeped steadily. Her breathing was faint, shallow. Even the nurses moved more slowly now, as if they didn't want to wake what little life was left in the room. Max had been lying at the foot of her bed for hours, barely moving. But suddenly, he stood up. Not in panic, not barking or whining. He just stood. Alert. Focused. Then, without hesitation, he climbed up onto the hospital bed, something he had never done before. He gently pressed his body alongside hers, curling around her like a shield. Then he placed his head right over her chest, and let out the softest, strangest sound. A long, low whine, almost a hum. Not loud. Not distressed. Just, steady. Rhythmic. Almost like he was singing to her heart. At first, everyone froze. The nurses didn't know whether to call security or let it happen. But Emily's mother, she whispered, "Let him be." And so they did. Moments later, one of the machines beeped louder. A nurse glanced at the monitor, and then did a double take. Emily's oxygen levels had gone up. Not a lot. But enough to matter. Enough to make someone say, "Wait, what was that?" Max stayed on her chest for almost an hour. Still. Steady. Silent. Like he was holding something inside her together with nothing but his presence. And when he finally moved, her vitals were better. Not fixed. Not cured. But, better. No one had an explanation. Not the nurses. Not the doctors. They reviewed the chart, the monitors, the machines. Everything said the same thing. She was stabilizing. And the only thing that had changed was Max. The next morning, no one really knew what to say. Doctors called it a small improvement. The kind they usually chalk up to chance, or maybe just the body's final fight before shutting down. But Max didn't treat it like it was over. The very next night, he did it again. Same time. Same way. He climbed onto the bed, curled his body against hers, and rested his head over her heart. And again. Her vitals improved. This time, the changes were more noticeable. Heart rate steadier. Breathing stronger. Color starting to return to her cheeks. The doctors were baffled. Could be coincidence, they said. But even they didn't sound convinced anymore. By the third night, the nurses were already prepared. They left a step stool by the bed so Max could get up safely. They dimmed the lights, cleared the room. Everyone watched, quietly, like they were witnessing something sacred. Max climbed up as if he knew exactly what to do. And once again, Emily's condition improved. This time, it wasn't just machines showing progress. She opened her eyes. Just for a second. But long enough to look at her parents, and then at Max. Tears fell freely in that room. Even from the nurses who had seen hundreds of cases like this before. No one said a word, they didn't want to break the spell. Each day that followed brought a little more life back into Emily. Tiny steps, like flickers of light in a tunnel that had felt endlessly dark. She spoke. She smiled. She laughed, a weak, breathy laugh, but real. Real enough to echo through the halls and make grown men tear up. Doctors ran new tests. Blood counts were improving. The cancer wasn't gone, but something was changing. Something that no chart or scan could fully explain. The only constant. Max. By her side every night. Holding on, in his own quiet way, just like she was. Some called it a medical mystery. Others called it luck. But the people who knew Emily They called it something else. They called it Max's gift. Weeks passed. What was supposed to be a few final days became a slow but steady return to life. Emily was no longer just holding on. She was fighting back. And right beside her, every second, every heartbeat, was Max. He became more than just her dog. He was her strength. Her comfort. Her reason. Doctors started using words they hadn't dared speak before. Improving. Promising. Recovery. Emily's parents, who once lived in quiet terror of every beep and alarm, now smiled when they walked into her room. They read her stories again. They brushed her hair. They whispered things like, someday, instead of, goodbye. And Max? He never missed a night. Every evening, he climbed into bed with her, no longer just resting on her chest, but now curling beside her like a guardian angel with fur. One morning, Emily did something no one expected. She stood up. Wobbly. Weak. But standing. The entire room froze. Her mother gasped. A nurse dropped her clipboard. A doctor whispered, "My God." And Max? He simply wagged his tail. As if to say, "Told you." Tears fell like rain that day. The kind that pour out of you when you've held pain too long. Even the doctors cried. Doctors who had seen the worst life could bring, now witnessing something they couldn't explain, but couldn't deny. They stopped calling it a fluke. They started calling it a miracle. One doctor, a man known for being tough, clinical, logical, shook his head and said, "I don't know what happened here, but that dog saved her." And maybe he did. Not just with his body heat, or his heartbeat, or some strange instinct. But with love. Unshakable. Pure. Relentless. The kind of love that doesn't give up. Even when everyone else has. Emily didn't just survive. She recovered. Slowly at first, a few steps at a time, then full days without pain, and eventually, back home, where she belonged. The same little girl who was once too weak to lift her head, was now chasing butterflies in the backyard again. And Max? Right there beside her. Every step, every laugh, every hug. Older now. Grayer around the muzzle. But still watching. Still protecting. Still loving. The doctors still don't have a clear explanation. Some called it a psychosomatic effect, the idea that the body can respond when the soul is lifted. Others called it highly unusual, which is the medical way of saying, we have no idea. But Emily's family didn't need a scientific term. They knew what saved her. It wasn't just medicine. It wasn't just hope. It was Max. The quiet comfort. The unshakable presence. The silent promise that said, "I'm here. I'm not leaving. Not until you're okay." Word spread. The story made its way around the hospital, then the town, then the internet. People started calling Max the miracle dog. He was invited to visit other children's wards. Not as a patient, but as a healer. Children who hadn't smiled in weeks lit up when he entered the room. Parents who felt hopeless found strength in the story. Nurses who'd become numb from years of heartbreak remembered why they started this work in the first place. And Emily? She's growing up now. Strong. Healthy. Forever marked by a chapter in her life that almost ended, but didn't. When asked about it, she doesn't talk about the medicine. Or the hospital. Or even the pain. She talks about Max. About how he stayed with her when it got really, really dark. About how he helped her heart beat when it didn't want to anymore. And how she knew, even as a little girl, that she wasn't alone. Because Max was there.